Good evening to all of you.
Good evening. Can you hear?
How are you?
Fine.
Yeah, I can hear you properly.
What about you? How are you today?
Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I was a little bit busy around some urgent work, but now I'm free and looking forward to have a discussion with you all.
Thank you. Thank you. We greet you, Dr. Punit Gaur, in our session, conference session, and we, with other students from the Eurasian National University, they gonna ask some questions about foreign policy of India, and we would like you to answer our questions. Thank you for coming. It's a great pleasure for us to speak with you, and we can start if you are ready.
No, sure. We
Okay.
can start.
Our first question is about non-alignment and cooperation. And the question is, what role does India play in global politics, particularly concerning in non-alignment policy, and what strategic alliance and collaborations does India engage in with other nations?
Thank you so much. At the outset, I would like to thanks Professor Agbota Joltobiskova, if I am correctly pronounced this time, for this opportunity to interact with the students of Eurasian National University, where I was teaching earlier for so many years, and I am still attaching with some of the research scholars. PhD scholars are working under me as a co-supervisor. So it is always a pleasure to have students interaction with the student of Eurasian National University. Okay, you start with the question of non-alignment. Actually, a very basic thing is that whenever we are aligned with something, we need to understand, we need to accept the terms and condition of that particular part. If you really want to align someone with someone, or you may take any example of society or any example of politics or economic. In various field of society, you can take this example. If you want to associate with someone, it means you have to accept the rules and regulation. You have to accept them as a friend, as a companion that you are going to work with them. And whenever you are going to work with them, it means you have to some kind of collaboration and cooperations, which also allow that you have to adjust something to sustain this alignment. Okay, but in the other form, whenever you are not aligned with someone, means you are having the independent thought. Maybe it can be a opposite, or it can be also supportive. It's entirely on your discretion that whatever policy you would like to lead, you would like to have, you have your own understanding about that. So that is the prime concern when India chooses this non-alignment policy as a strategic policy, as a foreign policy. And during the Cold War era, when world was divided into two blocks, USSR and US, at that time it was very evident that India should have that kind of a policy where it not looks like that it is aligned with someone. They have their own independent thinking and they will pursue accordingly. Just very pertinent example, very current example, that like the conflict which we are having nowadays at the world level, in changing geopolitical landscape, like Ukraine, like Israel, Hamas. These kind of conflict, when we are trying to understand what is the role India is going to play through its non-alignment policy. So I'll just quote the Foreign Minister of India, Dr. S. Jaishankar, where he very rightly articulated the non-alignment policy and its principles for India in this particular geopolitical environment, when he said that the principle of non-alignment policy of India includes that wherever there is a conflict, it should be an immediate end of the hostility. Okay, emphasis of dialogue and diplomacy, that is very important. The respect for international order and institutions such as United Nations, respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity of each nation, humanitarian assistance, and India's role as a peacemaker is very important in this concept. So whether you are talking about in history or you are talking about in contemporary geopolitics environment, these are some of the India's principle which reflects in its own policy, in own independent thinkings given by Indian Foreign Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar. But what is the different now? What's the different? If you really want to understand what is the different, the historic non-alignment policy and now contemporary non-alignment policy of India. The difference between India's non-alignments maybe 7 or 8 decades ago and now is this, that in its earliest form or avatar, India was weak politically and economically. But India of the 21st century is not weak. You should remind it. And as a powerful country with a legacy of peaceful foreign policy, India has the potential to play a positive role to broker peace wherever is the conflict happening nowadays. Its non-aligned approach will its strength instead of weaknesses to work with similar, minded countries to bring the conflict parties to the negotiation table. So that is the difference which you have. So that is something which I think I answered your question in detail. Thank you.
For your answer, it was really interesting. And the next question is, how does India contribute to foreign aid and humanitarian activities in different countries, particularly in developing regions?
Can you repeat your question? I couldn't able to hear.
How does India contribute to foreign aid, humanitarian activities in different countries, particularly in developing regions?
Absolutely. Very good questions. Look, what I think is that whenever we are talking about India's humanitarian assistance, we can divide into three wider perspective, especially whenever I'm talking about in the context of recent years. First is wherever there is a conflict or during the conflict or post-conflict, in the immediate aftermath of a natural disaster. First is conflict, second is natural disaster like earthquakes and failure of critical infrastructure, tsunamis and floods, and then support in addressing the challenges of COVID-19, where world witnesses that India's ability to humanitarian assistance. How within this period of time of COVID-19, how India sent the humanitarian aid to various countries. And approximately since during this COVID-19 time of this particular pandemic, in Ukraine, even in the Ukraine after that, including shelter materials, medical supplies, clothing, and dignity kits, these are provided. Nearly about 60 tons have been provided since this Russia-Ukraine conflict started. So that is, I'm just giving you some data which you can understand how India is contributing into the very recent years. And since January 21, India extended humanitarian support to Fiji after the island was hit by cyclone Yasa. Just giving you an example, which is very important to understand. Support from India in conflicting situation has also been extended to countries such as Yemen, Syria, Afghanistan, while India has also responded to other disasters in Myanmar and many other countries. So in recent remarks, even India's same external affairs minister, Dr. Jaishankar, stated that the country has become more sensitive to global expectation. The countries are expecting from India, wherever there is conflict or disaster or pandemic kind of situations, the country is expecting from India to have such kind of robust mechanism to help them, to aid them. As a result of its increased capability, and is the first responder in many countries, especially particularly in the South Asian region. And one more important point is ways in which India has witnessed or show its humanitarian support during the initial waves of COVID-19 pandemic. This underscores the government of India's approach to displaying greater conceptual and operational clarity while conducting its foreign affair. That is very much, as a student, you need to understand that whenever we are talking about humanitarian aid, the foreign policy or foreign affairs is very much associated with this humanitarian aid. So that is also very important. And in the financial year in 2021 to 22, MEA, Minister of External Affairs, annual report highlighted that India's COVID-19 related support to countries such as Afghanistan, Myanmar, Fiji are free drugs, testing kits, COVID-19 protection gear to nearly about 82 countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. That is something which is very big in sense of a country which is rising, which is developing, which is coming out its cocoon. Since if we are comparing to the earlier stage, and this is happening only since last 10 years or so. So that is how you can understand that how India is doing this humanitarian aid to many countries, not only during the period of conflict, but also with the disaster and in the pandemic. This is my answer for this.
Thank you so much for your answer. I'll ask another student to continue our questions.
Good evening. I'm a student of Eurasian Studies at Eurasian National University, and I have some questions. Today, and my first question is related to the economic position of India. And my question is, how does India interact with the economic, with the global economy, and what positions does it take in the global order, and what measures is India taking to boost its economic growth?
I couldn't able to hear you properly, but I think you're asking about the economic rising, or how India is rising in this global economy and what position, something like that. Yes. I think this is one you want to ask. Yes. It is related to the global economy.
Yeah.
Am I right?
You're right.
Look, one thing is very clearly, you need to understand that. I'll just give you some remarks, some statement by the prominent authority at the world level, especially in terms of the global economy, which shows that how India is performing especially whenever we are talking about the global economy. India continues to show resilience against the backdrop of challenging global environment. This is not I'm saying because I'm an Indian. This is said, or this is according to World Bank's latest India development update. This particular India development update, the bank's flagship half-yearly report on the Indian economy, it also observed that despite significant global challenges, India was one of the fastest growing major economy in financial year 2022 to 23 at 7.2% growth rate. That is huge. And India's growth rate was the second highest among G20 countries and almost twice the average for emerging market economies. So, this is just the reflection how India is doing with the global economy at the level of global economy. So this resilience was, you can understand that by its robust domestic demand, strong public infrastructure investment, and strengthening financial sector. The current Indian government are working very hard on these parameters. Whenever we are talking about robust domestic demand, whenever we are talking about strong public infrastructure investment, or we are talking about strengthening financial sector, the current government is doing a great job in terms of, because of this, it reflects that India is having this kind of growth, even at the time when global environment of, particularly in terms of the economy, is challenging. And one more statement I will just want to give you. Through this, you can understand what's India's position on the global economy is that India, US, and China will lead the new world order. That is the statement by the president of, I think, World Economic Forum. He was telling about, when asked that emergence of India as a global power, superpower, he said this statement about that. He also highlighted that India's economy is on track to become the third largest globally, no doubt in it. And it only could possible because of the new era of global leadership in India. And India's resilience during the pandemic, India's digital transformations, even in the payment system, UPI, so that reflects, these are some of the conditions on which India is rising in the global economy. I think this is my answer for this question.
Thank you for your answer. I have also a second question related to international organizations. What roles and positions does India have in international organizations, such as World Trade Organization and United Nations?
Okay, as far as international organization is concerned, especially when we are talking about whether you can talk about, especially mainly United Nations or any global multi-level organizations, that one thing is very important to understand, that India was the founding member of this United Nations. India had started raising concern regarding colonialism, disarmament, and racial discriminations. And India was also amongst the most outspoken critics of racial discrimination in South Africa. And when the Convention on Elimination of All Form of Racial Discrimination was adopted during 1964 or 65, I didn't remember that exactly, India was among the earliest signatory. That is important. And being the founding member of the non-alignment movement and the group of 77, India cemented its position within the UN system as a leading advocate of the concern and aspiration of developing countries. Even the government of India has strongly put forward India's case for permanent membership of the Security Council, which is now a great concern, which is based on its extensive contribution to the activities of UN, particularly the maintenance of international peace and security. I have collected some data about this, that 43 peacekeeping missions with a total contribution exceeding 160,000 troops and significant number of police personnel having been deployed. And that is how you can understand the objective criteria such as a population, territorial size, GDP, political system. These all attributes all together gives a strong favor to India to having the permanent position in UN. Another very important element with this particular government is doing is the June 21 was declared as the International Day of Yoga by the United Nations General Assembly, where total 175 nations co-sponsored the resolution. Is the highest number of co-sponsor ever any UNGA resolution of such nation. So that is something you can understand that how India has played a key role in the United Nations reform from since its inception. So that is why it is very important. And nowadays we are, or you can say in even in the many other multilateral organizations such as WTO. WTO also India has been an active participation in its affair and policy and played a crucial role in raising the concern and demand of the developing countries in WTO. But nowadays, what is we are witnessing is there is a key point of debate in the context of global governance is the outdated nature of these multilateral organizations. Either you are talking about World Bank or United Nations, which really need a reform, especially within UN Security Council. And Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi rightly pointed out, and when he was in the recently concluded G20 summit, he said that the experience of the last few years, financial crisis, climate change, pandemic, terrorism, and wars, clearly shows that global governments has failed and how this multilateral organization needs a kind of reform. So that is how India is playing its role in these in the global governance or multilateral organization, and how India expect from these organizations. That is my.
What and now our students ask questions. Hello, Mr. I'm Shindauletov, and I have some questions. First of my question is, how does India navigate its relationship with major global players like the United States, Russia, the Union, and what key aspects of this diplomatic?
I couldn't able to hear you properly. You are talking about that how India is having the relationship with the US and Russia, something like that.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Look, I'm just giving you a very recent example. From this, you can understand. I will not go in depth. What is the role India is playing as terms of the major power, or what kind of relationship India has with these major powers. I'm just focusing one very pertinent example in which you can clearly understand how India is managing with all these powers. Recently, the New Delhi Declaration issued at the time of G20 summit in India, where India was having the presidency of G20, which is recently concluded. And they adopted the New Delhi Declaration. At the very first day of the two-day G20 summit, this set the tone of the future negotiation of the world, where India successfully build a consensus within the G20 nations, G20 countries. Because, people were expecting, like countries were expecting, if I can say more dominantly, the declaration not to come out because of the paragraph of Ukraine would have been opposed by China or Russia. But the fact that everyone decided on a little give and take is as much as a tribute to diplomacy of India. That is show the diplomacy of India and India's ability to have chosen right. How you should be at the right side. It always be always welcomed by everyone. Because the most complex part of the entire G20 was to bring consensus on the geopolitical paragraph of Russia and Ukraine. This was, and when the Sherpa of G20, Mr. Abhikant Kant, said that over 200 hours of non-stop negotiation, 300 bilateral meetings, and 15 drafts. India has done a lot for this diplomacy. Mr. Khan said the shape of G20. And it also reflects when Joe Biden, President of the United States, said the decision made today were going to affect the course of the future of decades at a moment when the global economy is suffering from the overlapping shocks of climate crisis, fragility, and conflict. This particular New Delhi summit, proved that G20 can still drive solution to our most pressing issues and how India played a role into that. That shows how India is having the relationship with the major powers. At one hand, USA, at other hand, Russia. That is the pertinent example of this, I think. And from this example, you can understand how the relationship exists between major powers and India.
For such detailed answer to my question, let's move to another questions. Another question is how does India engage with this overseas Indian community, and what impact does this diaspora have on its foreign policy or diplomacy?
Look, it's very interesting fact that it was time when I was in Kazakhstan, I was also felt this particular diaspora, how India is relating with the diaspora and how India is having their strategic and foreign policy attributes with the help of the diaspora. Because I was in Kazakhstan for many years, and I was living there, and being a diaspora, I also lived in Kazakhstan. So that is something which is I can give you answer with my own experience with that particular question which you asked. Look, one of the greatest economic contributions of Indian diaspora has been in terms of the remittances, especially if we talk about the data in which, according to the World Bank report, India received approximately $87 billion in remittance in the year of 2021. And with USA being the biggest source, which is accounting more than 20% of these funds. So to mark the contribution of overseas Indian community in the development of India, there was one particular day which is called Pravasi Bharatiya Divas, PBD, which is always celebrated every year on 9th of January, where Indian government welcomed many prominent diasporas in every country, each and every countries, and not only welcome them to India, but also facilitate them each and every year. So this shows that how important diaspora is for the government of India. And in recent time, the government has laid a strong foundation by making diplomacy people-centric, especially with the diaspora, with government constant interaction with the Indian diaspora. And the particular, if I can talk about the current Prime Minister of Shri Narendra Modi, he is really proactive into this particular approach. Wherever he visited in the world, in any country, his first attempt is to meet, to connect with the diaspora of that particular country, Indian diaspora of that particular country. And he always excited to do this. So that is something which is very new in this particular concept of diaspora and government, their local government connection. So this is particularly the Indian diaspora is the bridge, because he always think that Indian diaspora is the bridge between not only the nation and India, their nation and India, because they always said that I also felt that, because Professor Abhuta and I always talked about this, that okay, ambassadors are doing their work, the respective ambassadors, but they have their own limitations for that. and the diaspora is the real ambassadors of their countries, because they don't have rule and regulation. They can entirely have connection and communications with every sphere of peoples. So that is something which is very unique in that. So I think India is doing great in terms of the diaspora connections, and even diaspora is both ways. Diaspora is also making its contribution to that.
Dhanyavad. That's what
That's good. That's good.
Of our conference, and we very glad to see you, and we'll be glad to see you in the future.
Yeah, sure. It will be always a pleasure, as I already told you in the beginning of this kind of communications or connections. I already told that it was always a pleasure to connect with the student, especially my own university, which is Eurasian National University. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time.